Good evening and welcome to Democratic Television. We're so happy to have you tonight. We've got a great show lined up in honor of Women's History Month. We're going to be talking today about women's reproductive health and all of the threats that we're facing at the state legislature. So today I have with us on our panel, we have Tory Mills, who is the Director of Community Engagement at Planned Parenthood, Corinne Roveti, family nurse practitioner and co-director of the Knoxville Center for Reproductive Health, and Bekki Vaden Ottinger, patient advocate at the Knoxville Center for Reproductive Health. Thank you, ladies, for joining us today and talking about this great subject. So we've got a number of bills coming up at the state legislature. All of them are disturbing.
To say the least.
To say the least, especially after what happened today. We're filming on Thursday. You'll be seeing this on Friday night, but there was a big vote on the floor of the House early this morning, with a lot of drama that I'm sure you'll be hearing about, but we are going to talk about that bill. That is the 6-week abortion ban bill. So it's a bill, it's called HB 77. It's sponsored by Representative Van Huss, and it passed out of the House by 65 to 21 this morning. So Tory, why don't you tell us what's in that bill and what it means to women's health?
Sure, and thanks for having us all here today. This is a really great opportunity to get to talk about this, especially, it's, like you said, very timely. Yeah, so we have been, I think all of us have been watching this bill since it was introduced this January. And other folks may have heard it called, heartbeat bill, but we've really been trying to call it what it is, which is a 6-week ban on abortion. So this would essentially outlaw abortion in the state of Tennessee before a lot of people even know that they're pregnant. This is a huge deal, and folks may have heard of these 6-week bans before because other states have tried to pass them as well. They've actually been seen over the last 5 or 6 years in about 12, 13 other states. And in all of those instances, these bills have been found unconstitutional. So we expect similarly here, which has been one big kind of pushback to this bill, particularly for folks who consider themselves fiscal conservatives, reminding them that this is likely going to go to court and likely going to be found unconstitutional because of the Roe v. Wade Supreme Court decision.
And yet, cost taxpayers money.
Absolutely.
Right,
Absolutely.
right. In fact, quite a bit of money to go to the Supremes is not cheap.
Absolutely.
Right. Yeah.
And I think, more importantly for us, and I think all of us, I'll speak on behalf, I think it's really, we're looking at a really scary time where, again, this would make access to almost all abortions illegal. And this is really putting women's safety and health in jeopardy, as well as their constitutional right to make these decisions for themselves and about their families. So I think that's kind of one of the big things that brings all of us here.
That's one of the big things. So this bill was introduced last year as well, and it was defeated because of its unconstitutionality. Even the right to life people are opposed to introducing any legislation that will be knocked down in the courts. So it's interesting, the bedfellows this year. I understand yesterday at the Capitol we had the Right to Life and the Catholic Diocese protesting against this bill. They do sponsor a different bill, which I think we'll get to and talk about, something known as the trigger bill. But they do oppose any legislation that would be considered unconstitutional, which, as Tory well stated, that in every state that has brought this up, and let's be clear, most of those states have been southern states and a few Midwestern states, and they've all been struck down. So we can anticipate the same thing if this bill actually proceeds. I know there are a lot of people in Congress who sort of enjoy or they go along with what the Right to Life folks propose, and several senators that we've spoken to are also opposing this bill because they know that it won't stand up.
Wow, yeah. And for your clinic, can you tell us a little bit about the Center for Reproductive Health?
Sure. The Knoxville Center for Reproductive Health is a private nonprofit facility that has been providing abortion care for 44 years, as well as birth control, gynecological care, counseling. The center, I've been saying for years, we've been here over 40 years, we're going to be here another 40 years, and I'm feeling a little hesitant of whether I can continue to say that any longer, because we have never been under threats as we are right now.
Right.
And I think what bothers me the most, the threats are coming from not physicians, They're coming from graphic designers, ex-Marines from Jonesboro, who
Yeah.
don't even know what a transvaginal ultrasound is, or had never even heard of one. And I think he's married and has a child. I don't know if he ever went to those appointments with his partner, but he would know if he had or had any knowledge of it. And we've talked extensively about this. We don't think it's anything short of practicing medicine without a license.
Oh yeah, well, yeah, I can see that. The definitions, I dived into the definitions immediately because that's where I feel you can see a lot of damage in the definitions, and they've redefined some things that I don't think they have the power to be redefining. The medical field defines all these terms,
That's
not
correct.
not state legislators.
Although we have seen that repeatedly by things
Yes.
like partial birth abortion,
Right.
which is a non-medical term
Right.
and has no relevance to anything, and now they want to redefine fetus and viability and all sorts of
fertilization
things.
and yeah.
And someone on the House floor this morning brought up a good point that this, in the bill, if a doctor were to perform an abortion past about the 6-week point when they could hear, a quote fetal heartbeat, the penalty, of course, would be on the doctor, and it would be a
Right.
felony crime. And
Right.
so, one of the folks that spoke on the floor this morning very eloquently said, we're really risking our doctors and our medical professionals in the state. We're putting them in a really tough position where the state is essentially trying to practice medicine for them, and putting, we already have a hard time keeping doctors, especially in rural areas. And now
Yes,
we're
that was a
putting,
great point.
putting so
Yeah.
much more, even more burdens on these folks. I think that was the Democratic chair, Karen Camper, said that
Yes,
this morning.
yes.
So.
I think all the Democrats really were very eloquent in their discussion, in their defense of their positions this morning. And then
Most of them, and I think it is worth noting that we did see 2 Democrats vote for this bill as well.
and who are they?
Yeah, we want names.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. Representative John DeBerry out of the Memphis area.
Oh.
Yeah.
And
What?
Representative, I believe it was White out of Livingston, Tennessee.
Oh.
So I think that's worth noting out there because this is, I know that abortion is a complicated issue for a lot of folks, but I think it's a conversation that we need to be having within progressive circles, Democratic circles, about this often being the one issue that kind of
Is exception to everything else,
absolutely,
including laws, medicine practice, all kinds of medical
Well, the
practice, all
Republicans
kinds of
were
things.
very eloquent on the floor this morning talking about, that wanting to save people and, this is something that we need to do. And that, the sponsor invoked his family's military service and, and then I thought, well, what is the deal with not expanding Medicaid then?
So we
These are
have to
all the
look-
same
We
arguments.
have to look at the other bills that they either oppose or support, which oftentimes are about taking away services to women and children who are
Exactly.
in most need.
Yes,
Right.
So
yes.
this whole contradiction about caring about life when they, it's this whole pro-birth movement and obsession with women's genitalia that we have going on in this country. And Tennessee used to be a fairly liberal state in terms of that. When things changed with Amendment 1, we basically have become second-class citizens in the state. Our privacy rights are now omitted from the state constitution, which has some of the strongest privacy rights in the nation. So we're now exempt from that, and we were also meaningful then exempt from all of these restrictions and bills that have been passed. And so now, after Amendment 1 passed, our state legislatures can cherry pick all the worst of the pieces of legislation that other states have had an advance on. And,
Right, it's
and
already
then
written.
put them all
Yeah.
together.
Yes.
And now Tennessee has become one of the most hostile states in the country towards women's reproductive health, which is
Yeah.
a very
Doesn't
sad
matter.
statement, considering that we're one of the few states that has refused the TennCare,
Yes.
the Medicaid expansion,
expansion,
which
I
would
know.
help. And then we had what bills this week? They want to now deny school children meals.
Meals, yeah. The school
if
meal,
their
yeah.
if their parents haven't paid their debt for the meal plan, the children will be denied food.
Right.
Because what parents do or do not do is totally the child's fault. Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
I know. You just we could
Yeah.
really wind ourselves up
Yeah,
here.
we could really go on about,
Good. And I
about
mean,
life at what cost and whose lives are we talking
Yes,
about.
whose lives are
and
we
I
talking
certainly
about?
don't want to go into like anything Amendment 2. I just find it interesting that this movement that is so concerned about saving lives are the same people that offer nothing but thoughts and prayers, when things like Parkland shooting
Right.
happen. And for once, I actually would just like their thoughts and prayers. I don't want them to legislate any more than they already have. Can
Keep
you,
it that.
Yeah, do us the same favor. That would be great.
Yes, yes. Well, I'd like to say that's the only bill that we're dealing with, but sadly, no. We have another that's called the Life Appropriation Bill. Tori, can you shed some light on that?
I will do my best. It's hard to.
It's really hard to decipher this bill and exactly where they're going or what they're trying to say with it.
It is. I'll kind of give you the upshot. I'll give you the upshot and tell you the intention behind the bill. So, this bill was written. It's really a misuse of the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment.
Yeah. That's what I thought when I read it.
Yeah. So
wow.
basically, trying to say that for lack of a better term, a pro-choice position or thinking that abortion should be legal is actually a religious belief, and trying to use that to make the funding of providers and organizations who provide abortion services, trying to make that funding illegal. So again, what the upshot is that the goal of this bill is just to another way to cut off funding to organizations like Planned Parenthood, like Knoxville Center, like any other choices in Memphis, organizations who provide safe, legal abortion services.
Yeah.
And we've seen these kind of attacks before. Planned Parenthood has faced attacks for years over, quote, defunding, right, where we don't get blank checks from the government. We never have. We are funded for things in some states like the Title X program, which provides free or low-cost birth control. We haven't had that funding here in Tennessee for years because of our state legislature. So what this really is just another way to try to reduce the number of providers of both safe, legal abortion, but other reproductive health care services. Right. Corinne named so many of the things that Knoxville Center for Reproductive Health does, that they are experts. They and also Planned Parenthood are kind of the community experts on reproductive and sexual health care. And I think people like coming to us because they know that is our niche. That is where they're going to get the absolute best care, the most options. Also
To be treated with dignity and respect,
Yes.
which does not happen in many health services, particularly for
Absolutely.
women's health care at this point.
The thing I hear most from our patients is, I didn't expect you guys to treat me so well. And that means two things to me. I grew up in a very religious and pro-life environment, and I was always told that, these women that work at places like this are evil and, they just want to make money off of you and that sort of thing. But also I think if they haven't been told that lie, women are just almost expecting to not be treated with dignity anymore. And that's very, very, very sad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's the thing that breaks my heart the most,
Mine too.
that women come and they say, I expected to be judged here and I was not.
Yeah.
And I think if that's how low their expectation is for medical care, and I don't think it just applies to us as an abortion provider, but women's health in general, and we hear it for prenatal care, which we don't provide directly, but for women who do receive prenatal care services, and those women particularly coming to us, they really do expect to be judged on almost every level. So any amount of decency and respect is so appreciated because, their bottom line is like zero.
I've had patients apologize for changing their mind and saying that I don't want to have an abortion procedure. I want to parent. And I'm like, oh, that's great. And they're like, oh, I'm sorry. I'm pro-choice. Do what you want to do.
Yeah, we're here to
You want to have a
support
baby, you go, girl. Like, I don't have an agenda here. I just want you to do what you want to do.
And that's the point.
That's the point.
Is that you keep that within the family and not having government decide.
Right.
And somebody once said to me, and I have on the campaign trail I did use this, that the government that says that you cannot have an abortion can be the government that says you will have one.
Absolutely.
And who is
That's
going
right.
and who is going to be targeted in that scenario?
That's exactly what I said when Amendment 1 passed.
Yeah, yeah. So I think it's something we need to keep in mind when we talk to people because it has stopped people short thinking, oh, wait a minute.
Yeah, and
I
we
hadn't
need to
thought
talk
of it that
about that
way.
more frequently.
Right,
And really let
right.
that be heard. It's also the same people who don't believe in big government and government interfering in their lives, except for women.
Right, right. One thing I found chilling in this bill was under the definition convenience abortion. I'm a definitions person, but it says a convenience abortion is defined as an elective abortion that means the act of using or prescribing an instrument, medicine, drug, device, or other substance to terminate a pregnancy. Now, could that include the morning after pill? Or could it
You know, anything could be misconstrued. And the
Sure.
morning after pill is not an abortifacient.
right.
There are those people who don't believe in science who propose the idea that the morning after pill is another form of an abortion, which it is not.
No, good to clear that up.
Yes.
Yeah, because I think when people look at this is what they're going to say. So I think there are some really troubling things in all these bills. We've got one that we were going to just flag a little bit. It was the trigger
It's
bill.
called the trigger
They called the
ban.
trigger ban.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think it's Senate Bill 1257.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And that's a disturbing bill, and that is a bill that probably will pass, which is what makes it even more disturbing. Like, because of the opposition from the Right to Life Association and the Catholic Diocese, I don't know. We'll see. This bill might not pass the Senate. Clearly, it passed the House, but it may not pass the Senate. But this bill, which would basically state that, and what is Senator Briggs calls it, the what if bill,
A what
that
if
he
bill.
doesn't believe in, but what if bill. So what if the Supreme Court decides to overturn Roe v. Wade? In the state of Tennessee, according to this bill, abortion would immediately become illegal.
And I would like to point out, with all the regulations and legislation that have already been passed, it's as if abortion is already criminalized in this state. You can only have a legal abortion if you do it exactly the way the state tells you to do it, and that goes all the way down to building codes.
Which is a long list like this. It's 42 pages of restrictions and...
I would like to add, there's no cutting and stitching in this procedure. Nobody receives anesthesia in our clinic because they don't require it. And you know,
abortion is the safest medical procedure performed.
right, and so basically you have plastic surgeons and dentists removing wisdom teeth and that sort of thing, and they're not having to abide by the same building codes, the same surgical ambulatory center type things.
Even though we're licensed the same.
right.
Oh, interesting.
We're licensed the
Interesting.
same, except if you're an abortion provider, there's a whole tag on for restrictions that have been passed over time.
Yeah, yeah.
Even though you're going for the same licensing as the dentist's office or the
Wow.
colonoscopy center.
And a first trimester abortion is statistically safer than a routine colonoscopy, according to the World Health Organization and ACOG, I believe. So, yeah, it's not really about safety.
No, we know that.
No,
we
it's
know
not
that.
that.
But this is a dangerous bill.
Okay.
And this is a bill that probably will pass.
Yeah.
And so we then all sit on pincushions until probably October, when the Supreme Court can potentially have a case that will be ready at that point, if they accept it, that would challenge Roe, which is what all of these states have been planning on doing.
Right,
They're trying to
right.
pass these pieces of legislation that will find their way to the Supreme Court so they can challenge Roe.
I think we're about to see that, as a matter of fact, because in November, Alabama, they passed Amendment 2, which is a lot like our Amendment 1, except they added in a fetal personhood clause. Now, I heard this week that there is a young man that is suing the women's clinic in Birmingham, I believe, our friends down there, suing for the estate of his aborted fetus. And his attorney, and under Amendment 2, they can,
Yeah.
you know,
So who's he suing?
litigate.
The state?
No, he's suing the
Suing the
clinic.
clinic.
The clinic.
So I think that is a case that could potentially make it up to the state courts, federal courts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we're going to start seeing all kinds of things like that pop
Wow.
up, and that's what's moving towards overturning Roe.
Yeah.
Wow.
Because
Wow.
you know the
It's-
states love to share their pieces of legislation.
Yes, through a little
so you
organization
see
called ALEC.
one, and then you see the next
Yes.
one, and the next state, and they kind
Yeah.
of fall like dominoes, and every state will
Right.
try to pass the same kind of bill.
And I think what's interesting on top of that is that Americans' support for access to safe legal abortion is at about a little over 70% of Americans support access to safe
Yeah.
legal abortion. So these are states, small groups of often older white men making these decisions on behalf of constituents, even in states like Tennessee, where there is not a majority consensus that abortion should be illegal. Again, a lot of people have complicated feelings about abortion,
well, it's a
but
complicated issue.
But they still feel that it should be available.
Yeah.
especially
under
unsafe
certain
and legal.
Nobody's trying to pass a bill to make anyone like it.
Absolutely.
And that's what
Yeah.
we're being treated.
Though I have to say, in the state of Tennessee, it's not all old white men; it's a lot of young white men.
It's true.
Which is troubling
And,
as
you know,
well.
there were a lot of women.
Aye.
You know, the women that spoke today were all white that spoke for it.
Our
And
parking
the
lot-
black women were not supporting this.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, I think it's very interesting how all of this is starting to play out. I'd like to move on to a little bit a positive. I mean, there are some good things happening in the legislature. I know we like to really dish on the bad stuff, but there's a bill that Senator Akbari from Memphis has proposed around women who are incarcerated and pregnant and deliver while incarcerated. And so, can you explain a little
I'll
bit?
talk a little bit about that. 'Cause,
Corinne?
I'm also part of the statewide coalition of Healthy and Free Tennessee, and we've been sponsoring and really advocating for this bill. So as it exists in the state penitentiary, that women, supposedly they are not being shackled while they are pregnant and in delivery. But in some of the state prisons, that is not the case. So the idea behind this piece of legislation is to eliminate that possibility that women would not be shackled during their delivery, which can cause all sorts of complications.
So women are in labor.
They are in labor
And they're shackled?
they are shackled, meaning
All
they
four
have
limbs?
to be typically.
Is
you
it
know,
feet?
I'm
and-
not. I think it's mostly hands.
It's mostly hands.
Yeah.
Interesting.
No. It probably is feet.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, because I'm just thinking of some women
So-
that have come
so we
through the
have
clinic
women-
for abortions that have been shackled by feet,
Yeah. So they're giving birth in prison, in shackles.
in shackles.
I did not know this until
Yes.
this year.
Yes.
That's crazy.
And it's not a standard practice, but it's not illegal.
Uh-huh.
So this would
And there are many, many stories of women who have had that experience.
the city of Nashville was sued 2 years ago, I believe, by an inmate who sustained
Was
some
forced.
injury, after giving birth while shackled. And so after that, they stopped it in the city as a standard practice. But
So this
there's
would
nothing,
make it statewide.
right, this would,
Well, good for
Yeah.
Senator
Yeah.
Akbari.
And there's
Yeah.
another bill about providing breast pumps and being able to store breast milk so that women who are incarcerated can provide the best nutrition for their children and have the best outcomes for those kids.
Wow.
And we'll see how
that's
far
wonderful.
Yeah.
that goes.
Okay. So it's got sponsors, and is it moving? Do we know? Is it moving?
I'm not sure where
I
it's
didn't
sitting right
check,
now. I
yeah.
haven't checked this week.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then we have another Women and Children's Health Insurance Act, which is coming up, and I think that's something that Planned Parenthood has been working on.
Yes, and actually on the House side, Representative Gloria Johnson from here in Knoxville
Yay,
is the House
Gloria!
sponsor.
She got taken down on the floor on Thursday morning.
Today was a
you
tough
know.
day.
It was a tough day for her, so please send her love on Facebook and Twitter.
Yes. But yeah, she is the House sponsor of this bill, and what this bill seeks to do is actually to concretize the Affordable Care Act protections for low-cost birth control, for prenatal, for supplies like breast pumps, things like that, in case the Affordable Care Act is no longer a federal law. We know that there are often threats under this current administration with to the Affordable Care Act, and so our hope is to put into state law some of those protections around, again, free birth control and other women and children's health insurance services. So,
Excellent.
Which we have seen in other states who have taken a very proactive stand in preserving services for women, because the Affordable Care Act has made an enormous impact. In fact, we think that we have the lowest abortion rates in history
Right.
because of the access that women have had to family planning services and to birth control.
Absolutely.
Yeah, well, given what I heard this morning about the preservation of life, I'm sure they'll enthusiastically get behind this bill.
I asked Representative Van Huss himself.
Oh,
He was interested, so we'll see how that goes.
good.
He's actually interested.
Yay!
Well, that's a step ahead.
That's
I'm-
very
that's-
good.
that
That's very
provides a
good.
little optimism in the moment because
I'll wait.
yeah, we'll see. We'll be watching. We'll be watching you.
Yeah.
Because as we see elsewhere, it's completely counterintuitive. Like right now with the National Title X gag to facilities not being able to talk about abortion providers and to withhold money, which again we don't have to worry about in the state because the state's already taken care of taking that money away from Planned Parenthood, who provides enormous amount of services for women who otherwise would not get those services. So now we'll have it on a national level, and there will be states that will be suing. I'm sure California is lined up to be first. As a matter of fact,
yeah.
I think they already have their lawsuit ready to go.
I think Oregon filed suit yesterday.
And Oregon, there we have it. But Tennessee there might be a bright moment rather than shooting itself in the foot constantly. But you know, that's all counterintuitive, and we've been hearing this for years of people saying, well, surely if people don't want women to have abortions, then they'll support birth control. But this has been generally a huge attack, or as it was called back in 5 years ago, the war on women. That's happening in this country, which is this obsession with controlling women, denying them services, denying them access, the government trying to legislate for what is best for women. It's a pretty regressive approach. You know, we've been steadily moving forward. Tennessee was moving forward for a little while, and now we're just being sort of slapped way back.
Yeah, well, I think that's happening in so many sectors that we're just seeing just this regression of progressive
You think in
ideals.
water and in the environment?
Yes, it was big. So what can people do? What can people do to work on these issues and help move us back to where we were?
I've been suggesting scheduling 5-10-minute meetings with your state reps. Get to know who they are, who you voted for, who you didn't vote for, that might be in office. We had a very interesting meeting with Dr. Briggs, who is our state senator. And as you know, he's a physician. So we talked to him as a medical professional, not a Republican, you know.
Right.
Like we are your constituents, and also we're in the medical field. And, you know, we have all these agree to disagree platitudes, but as a physician, and he prides himself on listening to his constituents and not being bought by, you know, special interest lobbyists, and we need to hold them to that. And one of the things he said to us when we were talking about personal stories of our patients, he shared some stories with us. When Corinne called him out on his contradictory statements of not voting for what if laws, the trigger law is what he was referring to, but then vaguely mentioning, you know, well, I have no choice, the right to life has me covered on this. Corinne called him out on that contradiction, and as we were leaving the office, he said, you ladies are making me feel bad. And I think the reason being, I mean, these men can't look at us when we look them in the face. So schedule those face-to-face meetings, because emails, they can disappear.
You can lose it. That's
You
right.
can lose an email,
Yeah,
Or you just don't have that same impact. Like,
absolutely.
All righty, well, we are coming to a close. We could go for hours. We should
We
probably
could.
do another one. We might want to sum up at the end of the session all that's taken place there.
and not to mention that we've only touched on some of the bills that related to abortion.
Yes, there
are
are many
many
more.
others.
Yeah, so I want to thank all of you for coming out. I really
Thank you.
appreciate you taking the time and helping us understand this issue. Thanks so much.